So I followed my procedure. I read and analyzed the prompt. I then read and analyzed the poem. I identified some things. Step 3 was to actually write the thesis itself. I have a pretty good thesis here I'm ready to go with. The next step is to plan my essay. It's not enough to just write a florid, beautiful introduction, airdrop your thesis in, and then make up some stuff. You want to write with an agenda, with a plan. By investing the time in doing this now, you'll be able to actually save time in the long run. Great test takers always do this. They go into essays with a plan. Doesn't need to have a million words, but it needs to have some structure to it. Now, one of the challenges here is I've already spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time analyzing the prompt. I spent a lot of time reading and scribbling all my ugly little notes all over it. I spent time coming up with a thesis. I shouldn't spend 10 more minutes planning the essay. Let's make this a really simple sketch so that I can slot evidence in and know how to start backing my essay up. The thesis is going to get me 1 point, but then the evidence and commentary is the other 4. So I really want to go after as many of those 4 points as possible, and maybe for now I'll just ignore sophistication. Okay, so here's my structure. I'm going to try to write a 4-paragraph essay. I've run a little bit short on time, so that's what's going to make sense for me. I don't have a lot of room, but I'll just do it here. I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in my introduction, I'm going to set the stage for my reading of this poem. My reading of this poem is it's all about uncertainty, dissatisfaction with your work, apples that are of no worth, of kind of that weird feeling you get as you're drifting off into sleep. So I'm going to explain the tone and the narrator, and then I'm going to end with my thesis. Once I'm done with that, I'll put my thesis straight in. That will be my first paragraph. Again, it's good practice. Always have that thesis at the end of the first paragraph, and then it's really easy for the graders to give me that point. Then I got to get to work in paragraphs 2 and 3. Now, in my thesis, I mentioned what I called in this version, strong first-person narration, but almost an intimate voice. That's what I'm going to make a whole paragraph about. I'm going to make it about the narrator. So I'll mark this as the narrator, and I will talk about the first person issue. That's just an observation. First person, I, right? Or the first person plural, we. But going beyond that, it's the repetition of this, the way he reveals his, he almost confesses to the reader all the pain and frustration and what I keep calling uncertainty about his life. So I'm going to get to first person, but then I'm going to explain how the first person narration voice works to convey this experience. And that will allow me to move almost chronologically through. So I'll go from beginning to end, but let me come up with some actual specific lines here. By marking down some specific lines, I have a place to go, so I don't feel like I'm making stuff up when I'm writing. So just scrolling back up here for a second, how does he do this? And I'll just take a moment and look for some really good examples now. You know, there's this lines 9 through 11 example, just briefly, where we have 3 times the line begins with I. And then with that, you have lines 14 and 16. But I was well and I could tell. It's not just a superficial observation to note that those are 4-word lines. One begins with but, one begins with and, one ends with well, one ends with tell, but that there's this parallel rhythm. You can hear it in my voice. But I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell. Something's happening there with the way that this guy's talking that I think I can talk about. So I'm going to grab on the lines 14 through 16. That might be enough for that whole paragraph about the narrator. Notice I moved quickly, I acted decisively, now I have something to grab onto. Okay, I also mentioned in my thesis the varying rhyme scheme. Well, you know, I kind of smuggled that into paragraph 2 already, so I might come up with something else here. Maybe what I could talk about is the issue of uncertainty. Notice that I'm not following the rule that like Frost uses 3 things and then my paragraphs have to reflect that. The graders get that you're writing this as a first draft, so let your paragraph be coherent and independent from the other idea, but it doesn't have to follow that perfect rule. So I'll make this about uncertainty and how uncertainty is conveyed. So let me find some examples of this. He says, where did I mark this? Oh, yeah, I could tell 16 through 17, he talks about what kind of dreaming was about to take. So is actually everything after line 17 a dream? We don't know. And then we drift from that the drinking trough in line 11. By there, I'm on his instep arch in line 21. There's a ladder moving. I thought there was a ladder at the beginning. So this uncertainty and the shifting, I'll call it the shifting setting almost. It's like we're moving around a little bit. And that gives me something to grab onto here. Maybe if I spent more time on this, I would more elegantly organize all this stuff. What is that expression? Perfection is the enemy of the good. If you try to be perfect on an AP exam, you can end up in a lot of trouble. This exam is not about being perfect. It's about being good enough to get a lot of points and move on. So finally, in my conclusion, I could talk a little bit about what I'm just discussing here, which is this issue of things shifting around, of maybe I'll end with this uncertainty of human sleep. No, that's what I'll do. I'm going to move the shifting setting into the conclusion, and under uncertainty, I'll put lines 39 through 42. He ends with the question, am I sleeping like a woodchuck that hibernates, or am I sleeping like a real human? That even he's apple picking, and this work has helped him or made him question his own humanity. So actually notice the process of doing all this, I kind of discovered a really good answer. And with this, I'm ready to write my essay.